Cool. All right. Hello and welcome to PNP Live. I'm Alan Watke and a part of the events team with Politics and Prose. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm so excited to welcome Jarrett Adams for his new book, Redeeming Justice. At any point during the event, you can click on the link in the chat that will take you straight to the Politics and Prose website to purchase Redeeming Justice. You'll also be able to ask Jarrett a question by clicking on the Q&A link at the bottom of your screen. We'll get to the audience questions at the end of the event. We apologize if we're not able to get to yours. We'll try and get to as many as possible though. Also, closed captioning is available, so you can click on the CC link at the bottom of your screen right next to the Q&A box. And this event is in partnership with the American Constitution Society. They are the leading diverse progressive legal organization, and we are so happy to have them on board with this and help, promote this event. They're fantastic, and I'll put some information, a link in the chat for that as well. Finally, we want to thank you all for being here. It's you guys that allows us to bring these conversations together, so thank you for being here. Now I'd like to welcome to PNP Live Jarrett Adams, celebrating the release of his new book, Redeeming Justice. From defendant to defender, my fight for equity on both sides of a broken system. He was only 17 when an all-white jury sentenced him to prison for a crime he didn't commit. Now a pioneering lawyer, he recalls the journey that led to his exoneration and inspired him to devote his life to fighting the many injustices in our legal system. In this illuminating story of hope and full circle redemption, Adam draws on his life and the cases of his clients to show the racist tactics used to convict young men of color, unique challenges facing the exonerees once released, and how the lack of equal representation in our courts is a failure not only of empathy, but of our collective ability to uncover the truth. Redeeming Justice is an unforgettable firsthand account of the limits and possibilities of our country's system of law. Jarrett Adams earned his Juris Doctorate from Loyola University Chicago School of Law in May 2015 and started a public interest law fellowship with Anne Claire Williams, judge for the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals, the same court that reversed his conviction. Jarrett also clerked in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York, the late Honorable Deborah Batts. After working on the Innocence Project in New York, he launched the law office of Jarrett Adams, PLLC in 2017, and now practices in both federal and state courts throughout the country. Adams will be joined in conversation with Shaka Senghor, head of diversity, equality, and inclusion at TRIP Actions. He is also the president of Shaka Senghor Inc. and founder of Redeemed Soul. His memoir, Writing My Wrongs, Life, Death, and Redemption in the American Prison, debuted on the New York Times and Washington Post bestseller lists. And Shaka's widely anticipated sophomore book, The Letters to the Sons of Society, will be released this January. And so without further ado, I want to open this up to Jarrett Adams and Shaka Senghor. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm super excited to be here today with my guy, Jarrett, truly one of my heroes and somebody whose work I admire. Jarrett, this book, man, is phenomenal. It's a powerful, beautiful read, but it's also painful, for me as a dad, as a Black man in America, as someone who's been inside the judicial system, to read this harrowing account of a child's life that was disrupted. And I'm very intentional about emphasizing the reality that you were a child.
Yeah.
And so I really want to take people on this incredible journey that you've been on, from being falsely accused and convicted of a crime you didn't commit at the tender age of 17, to serving 10 years of a 28-year sentence, and then coming out on the other side of that as a lawyer who advocates for the freedom of others. Take us back to that 17-year-old kid and what that experience was like for you and for your family. And as I say that, I really, I'm looking at the book cover, and I want to show this to the audience.
Yeah.
If you can see the innocence of that face, this is a 17-year-old kid. So I want the audience to keep that in mind as we begin to go on this journey together. But just take us back a little bit. What was your family construct? What was happening in your life? At 17, most kids are going off to college and proms and things of that nature. Take us back to 17-year-old Jarrett.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to thank you, Politics and Pros, Random House, ACS, and everyone who's joining right now, because it's important for us to have these conversations. And I go to what you just said, a couple minutes ago. These aren't tough and difficult conversations. These are necessary conversations that we have to have. And for me, as a 17-year-old kid, my life was similar to what you can find all over the inner cities in different cities throughout this country. I was raised predominantly by my mom and by my aunts and by my grandparents. And I, stayed out the way for the most part. This was when no one was not at the house type of raising in the 80s, before the crack epidemic came through and put the whole community in a chokehold. So I had mom and aunt and grandma, and we pretty much just stayed out the way. We weren't involved in a lot of the street life and stuff like that, because we had a bird's eye front couch view from our porch of the destruction and what it was causing, and watching our friends we went to school with, their fathers not around, and then they're being raised by their grandmothers, and then their grandmothers are telling them, oh, your daddy down south for a little while, spending some time with some family, but he really, locked up or something like that. And so we, the friends that I had and hung around, we all were trying to find our way out of the hood. Pretty much, that's like everybody's desire. So for me, I didn't have the sports talent and stuff like that, but I read very well because my grandmother would make me read. She would keep me out of trouble being in the kitchen with her, because her house was on a busy street. And so in order to keep me out of trouble, she would have me in the kitchen with her reading paprika and anything she can do to
shout
keep
out to
me
grandmothers,
out of
man.
Yeah,
shout out to grandmothers everywhere.
Man, shout out to, and so that was the uniqueness, and that is the uniqueness of how difficult it is to raise a Black boy in the United States. So getting out of high school, 17 years old.
What high school were you in?
So I went to a couple different high schools, but I ended up ultimately graduating from Hillcrest High School, which is like right outside of Chicago. It's like about 10 minutes outside of the city of Chicago. I started off in the city schools, but they were just getting too rough. And my mother was like, look, I had a brother who was 5 years ahead of me, and she had to wrestle him through all the city schools. And she like, look, I don't have the energy anymore. And then, Shaka, more guns started to come around, right? Like the use of more guns were coming as the 90s started to break into 92, 93 and stuff like that when I'm entering high school. So I graduate from out at Hillcrest High School, and really it almost seemed like two things, right? Either you go to the service or you go to junior college, because there weren't these attainable 4-year going to school at a 4-year anniversary and a budget to do so. The money just wasn't around like that. So I wasn't going in the army. I just wasn't doing it. Wasn't going in the army at all. No matter how bad they offered, and it looked good to get that little GI money and hope and wish that a war didn't kick off, right?
Right.
But I decided that I was going to go to junior college. So that summer, after graduating high school, me and my friends, we worked the entire summer and we would go to different parties and stuff like that at different, different spots, different college campuses, and just trying to stay out the way of the gun violence and the uptick in violence in the cities across America as the summer hits.
So basically, y'all were being kids. Y'all were doing what kids all across the country, suburbs, inner city, do all the time during the summer. They go off, they party, they have fun. Mm-hmm. It's part of the magic of becoming teenagers. And, I want to continue to underscore that point as we had this conversation, because we don't talk enough about how many of our kids brush up against these systems or find themselves entangled in these systems. And so, so you and your friends, y'all are kids, y'all going off the party, doing what typical teenagers do. So what happened from there? What take me into it.
So this is when the summer is over now. So the summer is ending, and we have about like 1-2 more weeks. So we are invited. One of my guys, he had buddies who were already off in school, so they would make it to school earlier and do like parties before like everyone got on the campus, and it was real time for school to start. So we each tell our parents, look, we're gonna spend the night over each other's house. Classic alibi. I'm sure everyone has used. Absolutely. And so we would get in the car, go off to a party to about 2-3, drive home, hit the truck stop, eat the nasty waffles and pancakes, and then make it back in each other's houses at about 7-8 a.m. and no problems at all. We did this over the entire summer. And we did this on this college campus in Whitewater, Wisconsin, where we had a consensual interaction with a young lady who would falsely accuse us of a rape that was clear from the very beginning that it was fabricated. And as I look back on what happened and how everything was put in motion, because now that I'm an attorney, I know how things were put in motion. It was very shameful, because the one piece of evidence that exonerated us was known for the police and in the police possession, literally the same time that the false accusation was made. And we never received it.
So let me, I want to delve deeper into this, because I don't want people to miss this big point, right? You're 17 years old. Mm-hmm. You're charged with one of the most egregious crimes that anybody can be charged with. And you're now faced with the enormity of navigating a criminal justice system that has already demonized Black males specifically, whether it's through media, whether it's how we're splashed across the news, whether it's how, we're portrayed in movies and other things. And you're a kid and you're faced with this serious charge and you're faced with this system. What happened?
I kept thinking that everything was going to work out because we were telling the truth. That's what I thought. Because when I'm growing up, my experience and my friends and family, we were all high school graduates, not records or anything like that. So we're looking at Dick Wolf's Law and Order as what the law system must really be like. And so when I'm accused and when I'm charged, I'll never forget saying to my mom, "Why are you looking so terrified? We ain't do this." But her response was, "Emmett Till didn't do anything either." And I didn't know a lot then, and I didn't understand why the call me when you get there, be in at this time, and where you're going, where you're at. See, I thought that was overparenting. Little did I know she was trying to save me for what ultimately we would endure as I was a 17-year-old kid sitting there under a baseless accusation that only had legs simply because the person accusing 3 Black kids was a Caucasian student. That's what was the driving force behind this entire accusation.
When I was reading the book, I found myself getting very emotional You know, I have a friend, his name is Calvin Evans, who I'm sure you will get a chance to meet.
Yeah.
He served 24 years for a crime he didn't commit. And he and I, we would talk a lot about what his experience was. And one of the reasons I bring him up, because he inspires me as a human being to go through, such egregious abuse of justice, of the
Yeah.
justice system, to live with the dehumanizing conditions for 2 decades. But to come out on the other side of that and advocate and fight for other people is really inspiring. And so when I was reading the book, what really came up for me was the many kids I mentor across the country.
Yeah.
And all of their faces just came flooding to me as I read about you being arrested and I read about your mother's reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that really just tore my soul apart was when you first went into the county jail and your innocence, just not just your innocence of the crime, but your innocence
Right.
as a kid who thinks that somehow this nightmare is going to, you're going to wake up one day and it doesn't exist and that everything is going to be all right, because that's actually what's supposed to happen. Everything is supposed to be all right for kids. And so that was just heartbreaking for me to read that and to know you as you are today. But I really want you to take the audience into the experience of a 17-year-old kid being charged with a serious crime. And now you're in the belly of the beast and you're going through all the indignifying things that happened.
Yeah.
What was that like? And what did that do to your soul? And what did it do to your family?
It was devastating. The entire time, what I didn't take into account until I started, to really just pay attention to the health of my mother and my aunts was this. I was physically in the prison, but they were there minus the bars, right? So my mom and my aunts, I'm talking about heavy in the Baptist church, deep into it. You big hat wearing, peppermint passing, front row, this my seat where my fan at. This was our lives growing up, right? We went to Lilydale Baptist Church in Roseland, in Chicago, south side of Chicago on Michigan. Big church where the church was the real family, church family, right? And so I'm talking about my mother and my aunt so creative. I couldn't sing a lick, Shaka, but they got me into some being quiet, right? Now they got me in there. They got me in there because the practice for the choir would require spending up my time so I wouldn't be out on the streets. Like that was a lot of what the creativity of it was that. And so now I'm going through this process. I'm in this county jail, and it was so utterly shocking to me. I understood what it meant to be accused of a crime. I understood what it meant to be convicted. I understood what it meant to go to prison after a conviction. No one ever told me that when you are still supposed to have the presumption of innocence, you would be treated like a filthy, convicted animal while trying to prove your innocence. I'm in a bullpen, 17 years old. The bullpen is only made to house 25 to 20 people. It's 50 people plus in this bullpen with one bathroom, no curtain, and we're all sitting in these bullpens being shifted throughout these bullpens to get in front of a court for the first time, when you're arrested. And I remember everyone looking at me and saying, shouldn't you be across the street? And what they meant by that was, shouldn't I be over in the juvenile section and not in the adult section with them? I didn't know too much of nothing. I happened to know, it was a couple people from my neighborhood who knew, like my brother was 5 years older, and they just knew my father more than anything, because my father was amongst the neighborhood and people knew who he was. So I was able, again, in a situation like that, to just gravitate towards some older folks in there. But looking at it and watching it, Shaka, it's ridiculous. You have a gang of men lined up outside a bullpen before you even go in a bullpen. Everyone's strip searching, everyone's bending over. This was back before Cook County Jail was sued for their process of doing cavity searches and stuff like that. So as a 17-year-old kid, I'm sitting there and I'm subjected to it all. To it all.
And I really want the audience to think about that. You know, think about your children. Think about the children in your community, the 17-year-olds, the 15-year-olds, the 16-year-olds, and imagine them going through this horrific experience. You know, in chapter 10 of your book, Redeeming Justice, and I definitely encourage everybody to check the chat, grab those links, go order the book. You know, this chapter really spoke to me personally. You know, I've served a total of 19 years. 7 of those years was in solitary confinement. And what you write in here just really, you know, brought me back to that space, but it also made me think about Khalif Browder, you know, this young man who was falsely accused of a crime and who spent nearly 2 years on Rikers Island. And when he got out, the gravity of what he experienced was so crushing that he eventually took his own life. And, you know, this happens far too often in our country where kids are put into these horrible conditions. And I want to read something that you wrote. You said, I live in a cell the size of a parking space. The room feels too tight to roll over. I have a cardboard thin mattress on a concrete block, a toilet, a sink, a shower, and a TV that gets 5 channels, all news. I have a rectangle in the wall the size of a hardcover book they call a window. I live in here 24 hours a day. I never leave except for 1 hour each week when I can walk around the yard accompanied by a guard. They may call this segregation, but I think of this as quarantine. I feel as if I have contracted some horrifying virus. I wonder if that's how my relatives felt back in Mississippi. Quarantine, as if being Black were a deadly disease. When I read that, you know, my heart just cracked open and poured out to you because I know that feeling. I know the suffocating reality of segregation and what it does to a human being. And I imagine you as a kid in that place. And, you know, I found myself getting upset, even though I know that you're free now.
Yeah.
And what upset me was the reality is that most people can't even begin to imagine the horror that you underwent at the hands of a system that on its surface is supposed to protect kids and supposed to protect innocent people. And it failed you. And it failed you horribly. And so I want to talk about that experience of going into this brutal system and how you had to navigate that and what your family had to undergo as you fought for your innocence to be proven.
Yeah, and that was it took 2 years to write this book because the difficult chapters, I just had to take breaks. And I drew inspiration from me and you spoke, and a lot of people don't know this. Me and Shaka spoke years back when I was trying to figure out how to do the book. And the last thing he told me getting off the phone was, he said, well, you just got to start writing, you know? and as I started to do it, I understood what you meant, because until you start to write and pour out the pain, then you can go back and edit and fix it. But I needed to just start writing. And I'll tell you this, I encourage people to go get the book because it explains to you how it grabs young Black men, right? And the tentacles never let go. And so here's an example, right, of that. So now when the police, I was coming home, getting ready to like go to next week and go purchase books for South Suburban College where I was going to college. So where I was getting ready to enroll and start that college that fall. So I get a card in my door from an officer and it says robbery, homicide, and it had my name on it. So I called the police station saying, look, I know y'all got the wrong guy. You know, why do I have this card in my door? He says, well, look, you're right. You've never been arrested. We don't have a picture of you. We just need you to come on down here and clear your name. So I go down there, and I should have never went down there without a parent, but they made it seem like they were gonna help me. And young African-American kids raised with folks from the South, the one thing they said, you respect adults, you respect authorities, you respect your elders. So I went down there thinking that I was helping myself. I remember them calling me boy. Said, boy, you really need to help yourself in this situation. Boy, you really need to tell us what happened. Boy, this, boy, that, boy, this. When we were charged, they referred to us as the 3 Black men from Chicago so much, Shaka, I thought that was our name.
Wow.
Right? I thought it was our name. And so, go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
No, I mean, it's deep when you say that you went down there thinking that they were going to protect you, because that's what they're ultimately responsible for, is protecting kids and innocent people and vulnerable people. And they didn't do that. And to switch from treating you as a child to basically lure you deeper into the system, and then to adultify you, which happens all the time with young boys and young girls, specifically Black and brown boys and girls.
Yes.
It's just really shocking for a lot of people to hear this, but it's not shocking for us. And one of the things, I want to read this real quick, and I want you to get back to your point where you're talking about Reynolds Wintersmith. You say so many young Black men like Reynolds Wintersmith have been ripped away from their families in the neighborhoods and thrown away for no good reason or no reason at all. They are now gone, lost, rotting in prisons. I was fortunate. I fought my way to a second chance. Sadly, that rarely happens. We don't know whom we're throwing away. Of the 2.3 million people who are incarcerated, 750,000 are Black men. The numbers are so disproportionate, they scream. That has to change. You were one of those 750,000 as a kid. And so what did that do to you when you went from this, boy, help yourself, and we're trying to help you, to, man, you these 3 men, you are now villainized. So tell us a little bit more about what happened with that process. And then I want to take people on this journey into prison and what happened there.
My youth was forever lost. I don't know what it's like to take that 18-year-old ID and go change it in for the new 21-year-old, where you can go drink and go to the bar and all of that. My friends, from high school, who did go off and go to college, they were mailing me letters and pictures. They were getting their first cars, first credit cards, maxing out their first credit cards, all the stuff that you do as a kid going through it. I was forced to grow up. My mother and my aunt, they couldn't afford to get an attorney. So I had to learn the law to be able to articulate the injustice that happened to us. And so that process was just it was an island. Man, I'm on an island and I can't even see the next island. All I see is water. And it took me to really sit down and pray, and to find something that I could look towards. And so what I did was this. I told myself that each day I was getting out the next, so I needed to prepare as such. And so even if it was a psychological thing that may have not been true until a decade later, it was something that got me each and every day out that cell. And I'll never forget when I got there to the actual maximum/super maximum prison. I remember that, everybody in the joint get a nickname, every now and then. You get a nickname, right? They were calling me Youngin, like Youngin, Young Chi-Town. And so what I realized was that the prison, when I got there, it was predominantly people in like their 30s up to 40 who had been doing 10, 15 years and had been doing a lot of time. And I was one of the youngest faces. After I was about 3 to 4 years in, it had flipped. And now it was predominantly people who looked like me. And the older crowd was on the back end. And what I recognized afterwards was this. I was in the height of the prison boom. That's when it started to uptick. And you know what they did, Shaka? The strategy of that uptick and what happened with it, they fed it with young Black men and increasingly Black women. That's what happened. It was more tough on crime. It was more, just like you said when we were talking earlier, where the situation with your son, man, I started to do work and become a tutor for people and was working in a library to help folks. And I would go over their cases and I would say to them, man, what are you pleading guilty for this stuff? And now you back on it. And people will say, listen, brother, I was just pleading guilty to get out the county jail. I was tired of sitting in there. I couldn't afford, to go to trial and prove my innocence, even though I knew I was going to be able to do it. But I just wanted to get out of the county jail and get back to my kids. I couldn't bond out. That's why when you said Khalif Browder, I couldn't even watch that show. I got halfway through and had to put it down, Shaka.
Yeah, no, I mean, I imagine that revisiting these traumas is very painful. And, it's one of the reasons I'm thankful that you wrote the book, because, people will get a chance to read your story and really understand what happens. And, when I think about, the story you just told, you were in there and people are like youngin, and they're giving you these nicknames because they're recognizing that you're a child still. And so what I want to do is go back a little bit before we jump into the prison part. But the moment of sentencing in the courtroom, we talked a little bit earlier about that and how the judge gave you this opportunity to speak on your own behalf. And, your mother's in the courtroom, your aunts and your family and community. And, you're 17, you're getting ready to be sentenced to prison. Take us into that moment and what that experience was like for you.
Just gut wrenching. I mean, because I'm watching my mom, and my mom felt like it was her fault because she couldn't afford to get me an attorney. So I'm watching her beat herself up. I'm looking at my aunts, beat themselves up about the situation, and it really hurt. So after the conviction, you prepare for the sentencing. So I wanted those women to understand and know, that they raised me right. And I wanted to apologize to them for making the mistake of sneaking out of the house. There's a reason why I didn't tell them where I was going, because they wouldn't have let me go to no party in no Wisconsin, right? Because they knew what I didn't know. They knew that Wisconsin locked up more African-American men per capita than any state in the country. They knew that. They knew what was going on, but I didn't, because I was too naive in thinking that this world would give me the fair shot like they taught us in elementary school, that that's just the history. That's not like that anymore. And so I stood up and I just said, look, I want to apologize. I apologize for my actions of sneaking and coming up here to this party with my friends, but I can't apologize for a rape that never took place. The judge told me that this act of defiance was lack of remorse, gave me an additional 8 years in prison. That's why I ended up going to this supermax / maximum prison, where I was one of the youngest when I got there. But I think that what they meant to do to bury me and then throw cement on top of me with that additional 8 years, they didn't realize that this was a seed that would not allow a structure to keep it from growing. And I was able to do it. And I don't want anyone to believe that I'm some superhero, because the superhero were the Black women who consistently and constantly never allowed me to give up. That was Peaches, Honey, and Sugar, my mother and my 2 aunts.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I love those names, by the way. So tell aunties we send love. But I really want to take you, further into that. I'm thinking about the responsibility of a judge and the responsibility of prosecutors, and their job is to administer justice. And what this sounded like to me was illegal lynching. It sounded like, there was this idea about you that they had already determined, absent all of the information, that was withheld, and so there's a vindictive nature to our court system as it relates to Black males. And it's very punitive and very dehumanizing and degrading. And it's that system that pushes so many of us into prison itself.
Indeed.
Now, in my experience of prison is a very scary place. And I imagine it to be doubly scary for a kid who wasn't in the streets, who was on the way to college, who was fresh out of high school. And now you're in this environment surrounded by adults who have been through this hard and brutal system already.
Yeah.
On top of that, you're accused of, in the prison hierarchy, what is considered the most egregious crime possible. And there's judgment that come with that. Indeed. And oftentimes there's attacks that come with that. And being a vulnerable kid with all of this on your shoulders, you go into this system and you meet mentors and you meet advisors and you meet OGs that take you under their wing and offer tutelage. What was that experience like, from the beginning to as you began to journey through the system?
Yeah, I'll tell you, grab the book for more details, but I got to tell this story about what I mean with the old heads and the impact and stuff like that. So there's 3 of us accused, and they ended up severing one of us because my one co-defendant had a paid attorney. His family actually lived in Wisconsin. This was the guy who told us about the party and we was going up there. His family called his family from Wisconsin, called the family in Chicago and said, listen to me. No matter what y'all do, y'all better get this boy a lawyer, okay? Because this is what it's like up here. So what they ended up doing was like putting up houses, and I think his grandmother put up a house or something like that. And they retained this attorney who was an amazing attorney who was known throughout the state. He was representing other like famous athletes falsely accused and stuff like that. So he was representing those folks. So his lawyer kept filing motion after motion after motion because what was written by the police was not testified to by our accuser because it was made up by the police, right? And I also want to pause right there before I go on, because I think that this has a lot to do with why it's so hard to get everybody to start moving towards reform instead of just talking about it. People like to say facts of the case. When police officers write police reports and they become testified to, they become what's known as facts of the case. That does not mean it's the truth. And so I say that, and I say that so passionately because we are allowing police reports and accusations to become the truths that keep young Black African-American men from ever having their constitutional right at that presumption of innocence going in. It is that historical depiction and narrative of Black men as being savages, pillagers of villages, and attacking this and doing all of that. So that's why, and that's how easily it is for a police report from an accusation to become facts. And now all of a sudden, don't nobody want to help you because they think they know from what was alleged in the police report and what was said in court. And that was the most devastating thing that I had to understand because I kept being so bothered by it. Like I'm bothered by the accusation. I'm sitting up in here with my mother and my 2 aunts who raised me, and I'm being depicted as somebody who gang raped someone. And I'm desperately fighting to shut up in the courtroom because I'm so outraged by this. And so I make it in this prison. And I remember getting sailed up in one of the most violent prisons at the time I was sailed up it was 2 violent prisons in Wisconsin, really 3. It was Waupun, Green Bay, and then there was Portage, where Jeffrey Dahmer ended up being killed in Wisconsin during the time that I was locked up. And so I'm in this dangerous prison in Waupun, and there was an attack. Someone was attacked and they lost an eye. They got hit with a mop ringer or something like that. They locked the entire prison down. This was my first lockdown, and I'm 18 now, turning 19, right? I don't know what a lockdown is. I'm thinking they about to lock down, look at something, let us back out. We'll be out at least to be able to move around. No, we was locked down in this cell with a cellmate, not moving for like the next 5 days, right? Wow. They didn't even give us a shower because they assumed that it was going to be a big riot, or they didn't know if it was an isolated incident. So during this time, they still allow you to have phone calls. I remember having a phone call with my mom, and my mom would patch in like my aunts on like 5-way. She would have everybody on the phone and we would be talking. I'm still surprised they never hung up them calls, but I'm talking to her on the phone and I'm explaining to her, because they kept asking me like, how on earth do you guys get convicted? Your co-defendant is filing all of these motions and you get 28 years. And I'm on the phone and I'm trying to explain it to him. And my cellmate, an older white guy, I was celled up with him for only a couple months, but he was one of the most influential people along this journey. There was a guy who used to always be in the law library. He had 2 life sentences, so he wasn't going anywhere. And he would do his time by helping other people. And so he said, look, man, I can't help but I overheard the conversation, but I'm a bit confused. And I said, well, what are you confused at? He's like, because you say you're innocent, but every day when the doors open, you go play chess, you go play basketball. I mean, you act like you on a college campus. I mean, you don't act like you innocent. So I said, well, look, I got a public defender who's doing my appeal and they're handling it. And he looked at me with a straight face, Shaka, and he said, you had a public defender who handled your trial. How'd that work out? And I'm still man, my mind ain't nowhere near being an adult. I thought everything was gonna be okay. That was my thing as a kid. I was numbing myself to the pain of being in there by ignoring. And so we get off of lockdown, and he gave me that case Strickland versus Washington, because I let him read some of the transcripts and the paperwork. He like, man, look, you sitting up here playing basketball and joking around and shit. It's only a matter of time for you around here with a tattoo teardrop under your eye and a shank tattoo on your neck. Like, what are you doing, man? Like, this is some crazy stuff. You're co-defendant right now. You need to be writing letters on this statement. It was a statement from Sean Demain that I had already knew was integral, and I knew he had to have said more because he was the guy that we were hanging out with, the white, neutral, male college student. And little did I know, it was him who had wrote a statement vindicating us to the police the very next day. And they had it the entire time, and they never turned it over to us at all. And we had to find it after our conviction. And that was I will never forget, like, that important part of being in there. Because if I hadn't got that wake-up call, if it wasn't that attack that put it on lockdown, man, I would have been out there trying to be the Michael Jordan of the damn prison, man.
And that's a common reality that people kind of throw their hands up when they're expecting the system to do its job. We're going to have questions coming in from the audience at some point. If you have questions, hit that Q&A. I just want to push the conversation forward a little bit. You know, Jarrett, obviously we can talk all day, man. You know, you can't condense your life into an hour-long conversation. And so it's great that you have the book, and I'm really excited for people to go out and grab the book. Make sure y'all click on them links in the chat. Get this book. I promise you, it's going to take you on a journey that really, you know, reveals all the things about the system. And just a couple of things that said about the book. This is from Scott Turow. In a moving and beautifully crafted memoir without hyperbole, I always wanted to say the word hyperbole, or rants, Jarrett Adams compellingly demonstrates the institutionalized racism of the American criminal justice system. John Grissom, who a lot of you may know, Adams' story is often hard to believe. The injustice that locked him away is maddening. The cruelty of his incarceration should be actionable. His quest for the truth is inspiring. His determination not only to survive, but succeed is nothing less than heroic. Earlier, you talked about not being a superhero. I disagree. I think your mother and your aunts are superheroes, but as I do think the same about you, because despite the things you faced in the system, you taught yourself and trained yourself and was fortunate to attend college to become a lawyer who now advocates for the freedom of other people.
Yeah.
You started a nonprofit organization. You work with the Innocent Project. You're helping to get people their freedom back and to hold a system accountable. How did you become a lawyer after being a kid falsely accused? And why is it so important for you to do this work when most people would say, look, I want to be behind that nightmare. I want it to be over. And so after you answer that, we'll pop to the audience, get some questions, and then we'll just dive back in.
Yeah, I told you before, South side of Chicago, and we use a term called get your lick back. I wanted my lick back for my mother. Okay. I wanted my lick back for my aunties, because when I went in there, I'm talking about fish fries, cookouts, get-togethers. A lot of important decisions were made in the backyard over barbecue grills with the family. When I got out, that decade didn't just take for me. Now you're talking about dialysis treatments. Now you're talking about me visiting people in nursing homes because they battling deep in dementia. And I'll never forget the real like impact of the loss hit me so hard at one of the smallest points. I'm sitting in my mother's living room. You ever been at your mom's or at your family house and you see a photo album, you just grab it, right? Because you just want. I look at the photo album, I see pictures of the entire family, me, kid, everybody together, all the way up, 8th grade, prom picture. My graduation picture was the last picture in that album, but the pages continue with my family without me throughout those pages. I didn't see my picture again until after I was released, and my mother threw an event and she put my picture back in there. But I flipped through almost a decade of pictures and didn't see my face, man. And that right there, that right there, I remember having to get up and go take a walk. And I ended up walking. It was cold as hell. I mean, it was like February cold 2007 when I got out. And I walked and I looked up, and there was South Suburban Community College. And I had that's where I was supposed to be going before this started. So I walked in there and I enrolled, and more importantly, my family encouraged me to get the desperate mental health care that I needed, because I needed to find a way to channel my anger and frustration into the fuel that drove me to build Life After Justice, to start to litigate these cases, to go clerk in the same circuit that overturned my conviction and redeem the justice that was promised to us in a justice system that has never been built and designed to protect us.
That's so powerful, man. I'm sending so much love to your family, and I feel like I know them from reading the book, because they mirror so many of the families that I talk to. They mirror my family. When you talked about that photo album, it took me back to sitting in the living room on the couch covered in plastic and looking at those photo albums. And I had that same experience when I came home. I go to my aunts and uncles and I look through those albums and I'm not there, I was guilty of the crime that I committed. And so my experience is different, but nonetheless, it was a brutal reality. And so, my heart still goes out to you. Would love for this. We got a question in the question box. What, in your opinion, this is from Admati. I'm hoping I pronounced your name right. If not, it's all, from a good space.
Right.
What, in your opinion, would be the most effective action legislation for removing the unfairly convicted Black and brown people from prisons and not have more people dragged into this dark and desolate pit in the future?
Yeah. We got to do something about prosecutors' power. That's simply input. It may not be, something that we're able to figure out all in one swoop, but we got to figure it out, because that is the most powerful piece on the chessboard, and they shouldn't have all of that power. And I'll give you a perfect example. The prosecutor in my case, when we found the evidence from that statement that was withheld by the police, the prosecutor dismissed the charges against my co-defendant and let me and my other co-defendant go through 7 years of appeals and let the court decide it. That prosecutor had the power to use his discretion to file a motion on his own and reverse our conviction, and he didn't do it. And this is not the isolated case. I want people looking at this to go look up Cook County case Giovanni Long. I represent a young man who I know was beaten to a confession by the police. And right now, his co-defendant, his conviction was reversed. We were able to get the co-defendant an actual innocence certificate, which means that the state's attorney is acknowledging the co-defendant is actually innocent. So tell me right now, Shaka, why I'm $20-something thousand of my own money representing this man for 2 years, when this prosecutor's office has the opportunity to reverse the conviction based on the same evidence of innocence, which they know happened in the co-defendant's case. It's because if you leave it up to one person to decide the fates and have that power, that's when things go wrong. We have to find a separate entity. And I'm not talking about the grand jury, because you can grand jury indict a ham sandwich if you wanted to, right?
Right, absolutely.
So we're talking about a separate body that is evaluating these cases and situations and moving with the speed that shows that we value the lives of those who are being disproportionately affected. That's what we need. I want to say this too before, but look, I was out. I said this, during another little podcast. Me and my wife were out, and we were traveling, and somebody was using their phone and they were dropping it. And you know the let me try to catch it thing. So me and everybody in this little area was watching them, and we were hoping that they caught their phone before it hit the ground, because you know why? Black, white, no matter who was there, didn't know each other. We knew it was a value of that phone, and we knew the experience it was like to crack your phone or break your phone. And so everybody was praying that he kept it from hitting the ground. Shaka, until we get people to care about the actual humans who are hitting the damn ground in the criminal justice system, we ain't gonna be able to fix this thing. We need everybody to care.
That's real. You know, I want to make sure people check out the link lifeafterjustice.org. Where's your org based at?
So the organization is based in Chicago, and what we're doing right now is this: we're building right now. So we're not just asking for money, we're also asking for people. We need big law. If we're really gonna have a round conversation about what it's gonna take to do reform, we need big law to give some big pro bono hours, give some big pro bono bucks. We need support. I worked at the Innocence Project and built this model after having the experience there, because people who are directly impacted need to be directly at the helm of the decisions being made.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So we got a couple of more questions coming in. One, Lisa originally dropped in the chat, so I'm gonna start with hers first. She said the police acted badly. We're wondering how you feel about your accuser. How do you feel about her actions initially and along the way? And that's a powerful thing, because a lot of times we hear about, you know, the people who are convicted, falsely convicted, and you know, do accusers get held accountable, first of all? And how do you feel about it?
So I want people to go look at the book and see how I arrived at this point that I'm about to say. But for me, we were all kids, Shaka. This accuser didn't go, I'm running out of a building. She went to a friend that went to a friend, and all the false accusation started because her roommate was shaming her and calling her names for hanging out with Black guys. You understand? So this rumor led to a friend telling another friend, and then a campus sexual assault expert who overzealously wanted to fit the title that she gave herself. So when I look at the situation, I look at it and I say that this was something that snowballed into something that she never expected. We were kids. Why weren't the adults being adults? And I go deeper into it in the book and tell you how I arrived. Now, we're talking about me and my feeling right now as an adult and having to deal with the conversation. But of course, back then I was mad at everybody associated with this false accusation.
Justifiably, as you should. So thank you for that. And make sure y'all read the book. I've read it, so I know how he feels. Redeeming Justice. Grab that book. The links are in the chat. Mary McDaniel's question is there any way to exonerate and release prisoners in those states that have a time limit on submitting new or hidden evidence?
Yeah, it is not. Let me just say this: there's never a clear avenue in post-conviction work, and the reason I say that is because the post-conviction world believes in finality more than they do justice. So once you get convicted, the burden isn't reasonable doubt anymore. And sometimes people think that lack of evidence on post-conviction means evidence of innocence. It is not. It's a different burden that you have to meet. So you have to understand, in terms of my conviction and all convictions that are reversed, there is evidence of innocence that was not in front of the fact finders when a person was found guilty. So to answer that question more specifically, what needs to happen is this. First of all, if you're looking to reverse any conviction, you have to look at the laws in that state. They change every day, and you have to look at the case law. Secondly, if there is no case law and no changes, that's where you need to start. Start with the avocation in that jurisdiction of how to make post-conviction avenues of actual innocence easier to litigate. There are people right now, including my client, Giovanni Long in Cook County, Illinois, who are sitting in prison while the prosecutor's office is arguing procedural arguments, not the substantive issue about his guilt, but saying that, oh, well, he missed the deadline, or he missed this, he missed that. and it makes no sense at all, Shaka.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really sickening. I know we got about 3 minutes left. So a couple of things really quickly. Somebody asked, how do they further connect with you? You can follow Jarrett Adams at Law. Is that what it is? At Law,
Yeah.
across all social media platforms. Click on some of the links in here, Life After Justice. Quickly, this last question came from, I think it was Danita, disappeared, but she talked about mental health, while you were going through the process and after. And you talked a little bit earlier about, after you got out, your family supporting you and getting you into mental health treatment. And what did it take while you were inside to get through there?
Man, it took them. Like Shaka, I can't tell you just how important it was at different times in there when I was ready to break someone, that I would get a letter from them, encouraging me about the story of Job and, so the book of Psalms. And, my one aunt, Josephine Sugar, her real name is Josephine, but Sugar, she would send me the Tribune. And I would tell her, like, Auntie, why are you spending so much money on this paper? I'm getting it 2 days late anyway. She said, no, baby, I'm doing it for a reason. I need you to see what's happening to our neighborhood and your friends out here. They being locked up in federal prison, being accused of being Nino Brown. But I know that they can't even afford to take care of their babies they having out here in this community. So you need to see this. You need to see that while you're in there and you're fighting, it's still a fight going on out here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, man, thank you so much. The book is Redeeming Justice. The links are in there. Obviously, we got to do this again, man. There's just never enough time. It's so much, but the things we didn't get to in this conversation are definitely in the book. I promise you, it is a powerful, inspiring read. Despite where it starts at, it ends with so much hope for the future. And Jarrett, I'm proud of you. As I mentioned earlier, you're definitely one of my personal heroes. I want to continue to support lifeafterjustice.org. Not only does it need financial resources, it need human power to really change some of these systems. So go check that out. Grab the book, Redeeming Justice. Follow Jarrett across all platforms. And shout out to Politics and Prose for hosting us. We look forward to being in more conversations soon.
Thank you all, man. Thank you, Shaka.
No, thank you so much for having me, bro. Super excited to be here.
Jarrett and Shaka, thank you both so much. Honestly, I've been looking forward to this, your conversation for a while now. So I'm happy that we were able to have you on here to really dig into this. Like Shaka said, the link to Jarrett's book is in the chat. The link to find out more about Life After Justice is in there. And there's a direct link to donate as well. So all of those are there. Click on those, find out more. I'm also excited. Shaka's book is coming out in January. Hopefully we can get him lined up for that.
I'll come back if you ask.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, maybe we can get Jarrett to come back and just keep going.
Yeah, no, you definitely, Jarrett, we're going to make sure Penguin gets you an advanced copy of the book. I would love to be in conversation with you about this new book, man. So super excited and truly appreciate Politics and Prose for inviting me to, share my story and my book and my work. So really look forward to that.
Absolutely. But for right now, check out Jarrett's. That link's in that chat. So
bam.
There you go.
I love the colors. You see it match the books on my shelf back there. So it's a hot cover right now. It's a hot color right now,
sir.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really powerful.
All right. Well, thank you all.
All right. Happy Sunday, man.
Yeah.
All right, brother.